Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari is set to meet with US President Donald Trump today to discuss ways to enhance the strategic partnership between the two countries, among other things. Esili Eigbe, Director and Head of Equities at Exotix Nigeria, joins me now to analyse the possible outcomes of the meeting and impact it could have on the equities market. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Now, what do you make of this development? I mean, I can see pictures already, on the internet right now, Buhari in a handshake with Trump.
Yeah.
It's really hard to believe what's happening out there today. But what do you make of what's playing out?
Well, first and foremost, the purpose of this meeting is really to strengthen, U.S., American ties. As you know, going into the latter part of the previous administration, the relationship did sour. So that's essentially really the focus. But I think that from a U.S. perspective, there's clearly going to be quite a number of discussions, around, security, the president's major mandate or focus, corruption, for example, economic situation in Nigeria. But I suspect that security would be perhaps the most paramount of the discussion, how they can obviously help Nigeria sort of strengthen sort of regional security. As you already pointed out yourself, towards the end of the other last administration, there was a reluctance from the U.S. government to sell equipment to Nigeria. But I think that there has been an improvement since the Buhari administration came in with very strong sort of confidence from the U.S. government, to the extent to which, President Barack Obama had invited President Buhari to the White House. And there were, again, similar discussions, and again, the U.S. reiterating its confidence in the presidency's ability to improve, cut corruption in the country and then strengthen, securities. And I think there's been obviously a positive outcome of that. Boko Haram is significantly less what it used to be, but it's still a serious issue in the country. And I suspect that that will be one of the focus on how the U.S. can help perhaps completely eradicate.
What do you want to see differently from this particular discussion? Remember the first time Trump and President Buhari did speak, from our understanding was over the phone to begin with, and of course around security issues were discussed. Now, we also understand that the legislation in the U.S., which of course under Obama, the fact that Obama did not approve for weapons to be sold to Nigeria was owing to human rights abuses, which it seems President Trump overturned, to say he's actually going to go ahead to sell. We're talking about a $496 million sale of aircraft to be delivered in 2020. On our side, the Senate is also not happy, with the withdrawal of funds to buy these aircrafts. How significant do you think this meeting is really going to be at the end of the day, with what President Muhammadu Buhari is facing on this end? Let's not even talk about Trump at the moment. I mean, he's president. He says final right now with the U.S. I
don't think it's that the politicians are unhappy. I think it's just what they perceive to be not having followed due process, And I think that, as you know, this kind of matters do have their ways of being resolved in the end. So I think that I'm sure the presidency, and perhaps even in the legislature, there's a sense that they can resolve this issue. And so to that extent, I don't see why discussions with the American president can go on in the context of, weapon sales and things like that, that would better Nigeria's, security.
Yeah, but we do understand, of course, the Senate is very responsible for holding the country to ransom most times. The budget is yet to be seen, to begin with. Now, if this is not settled between, both arms, who knows? It could just end up being some other discussion.
We're very confident that it will be resolved, and I'm sure the presidency is.
Now, besides
like
security,
I said, it's a question of due process, and so you perhaps just need to sort of, go back to the drawing board and then follow the due process.
But I know that those also argue as well that it's not really about the equipment or arms that we receive from the U.S. It's clearly about intelligence sharing, what we're doing with the information we have with us, which of course still remains a major problem. You talk about the fact that, according to President Buhari's administration, Boko Haram has been technically defeated, but then we see pockets of violence coming up with Boko Haram. Worse still is the spread of herdsmen's killings going on in the country, and that's where the argument on the need for proper intelligence comes in.
I think you're right. Weapon sale is one thing. The other thing is, having the right level of competency. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but there are already existing programs, that have been provided by the U.S. government, training programs for, Nigerian security forces. That's ongoing as we speak. So I think that this discussion between both presidents would only help to strengthen that. So there's a lot of work going on in that process, some of which are relatively new. But I think that this meeting will only help strengthen those efforts. And also more important is the U.S.-Nigeria relationship. Having making the U.S. a lot more confident on Nigeria's sort of progress and plans, not just around security, but the economy and other things.
Clearly, how do you see that playing out? I mean, the president came under fire last week for a statement he made about Nigeria's youths, which is actually the country's strength to begin with. And if already you categorize the youths in Nigeria as lazy, tell me, how confident do you think investors will be to step into such a country with a bunch of lazy youths?
Well, I like to believe that, he was taken out of context, so I'm not judgmental around that. I think he was taken out of context. I'm not going to go into discussing if we have lazy youths or not. I think the clear answer to that is obvious. But I think that it's obviously very important while he's out there to be more constructive.
When we talk about being more constructive, let's talk about that in the issue as it regards trade. What do you want to see come out of this meeting? What is your expected outcome for this
meeting? As I said, first and foremost, security. I think that if that's all that comes out of this, it's a positive, because... You
think that's a major issue at the moment? That is a major issue, no doubt. We have dealt on that. Let's talk about the issue of trade now, for instance. I mean, we are hungry for investments in the country at the moment.
Yes, but you see, if you don't have a secure environment, you can attract necessary investment, and that's why I'm saying this is very critical. ExxonMobil, which is one of the biggest investors in our market, is a U.S. company. There will be, representatives from that company attending, dinners and functions with the President Buhari team. So I think from their side, getting some comfort that those security issues will be addressed, not just in the northeastern part of the country, but also in the southern part of the country as well. And just everywhere, Benue, and other parts where you've had, issues, would give a lot of investors, not just U.S. investors, but global investors, a lot more confidence on our market. So from a market point of view, I would like the market to take this positively. Any feedback of, bilateral ties towards strengthening Nigerian security should be a positive for the markets.
But do you really see that impacting the markets today?
No, I don't think the market's paying much attention, but that's why I'm saying that, look, the market should see that as a very strong signal. There are a lot of businesses, listed companies operating in the northeastern part of the country and other areas where all the security threats. Any signal that the U.S. support helping towards dealing with those issues is seen as, obviously, I would say serious, or strong commitment should be taken positive, because what then happens is that those companies can then commit to investing more, and then perhaps creating more jobs and things like that.
Well, clearly it has much more to do with actions than really words here. I mean, this is not the first time we actually have presidents meet to talk and make promises. I guess what Nigerians and investors you've talked about really want to see is
action.
Exactly, and see how far we can actually, if we can go for a week without talking about herdsmen's killings or explosions as well in the
I think that the Obama discussions in September, perhaps because it was kind of the first, I didn't feel like it produced the kind of actions that we all anticipated.
And you think Trump's will?
I believe that President Trump, despite his nationalistic ideology, would like to see, an improvement in the relationship of both countries. And to that extent, I think that he may be able to, allow a few things.
I guess we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed and see how that really plays out in the coming months. Esili Eigbe there, Director and Head of Equities at Exotix Nigeria.